Welcome to the Plant Trainers Podcast, where we're helping people improve their quality of life through nutrition and fitness. And now, your hosts, nutrition and wellness coaches, international speakers, Adam and Shoshana Chaim.
Hey, I'm Adam Chaim.
And I'm Shoshana Chaim, and we are
Propelled by Plants. Today we bring to you episode 428, Having a Kind Kitchen with Dreena Burton.
In this episode of the Plant Trainers Podcast, we talk with Dreena Burton all about her kind kitchen and pressure-free cooking. So she's been on the show before, so we start off catching up with her to see how her children have navigated plant-based living over the last 6 years throughout their teens. Then we talk about ways of making plant-based cooking pressure-free with batch cooking ideas, uses for sauces, and you're going to be blown away by the ideas for things that you could freeze that you never knew that you could freeze before. Dreena gives some ideas for home and school lunches, as well as shares some of her favorite recipes from her new cookbook, Dreena's Kind Kitchen, 100 whole food vegan recipes to enjoy every day.
Dreena is the OG vegan cookbook author. She's been vegan for 25 years and also a mom of 3 weegans. She charted her journey as a plant-based cook and mother of 3 through 5 best-selling cookbooks. Dreena's also collaborated with renowned plant-based physician Dr. Barnard on The Cheese Trap and co-authored their most recent cookbook for reversing diabetes. Dreena's recipes have been featured all over the place. You probably have heard of her before, and if not, you should definitely go back and listen to the first episode we had her on the Plant Trainers Podcast. Dreena was also the Culinary Coordinator with the Food Revolution Network's Whole Life Club. You're going to love this episode. Make sure to share it out with anyone who's in a kitchen at any point, because there's so many great tips to help you make more kind food. Enjoy the show.
You've told us that you're bored of what you're cooking. You've told us that you're not eating out as much and you want to be a little bit more entertained with what's on our plate. So we showed up and we made the Plant-Based Comfort Foods Cookbook. It is an e-cookbook that is above and beyond what we've done before. The pictures are gorgeous. The recipes are easy, but they're going to look restaurant quality. We are super excited for this book and we can't wait for you to get your utensils on it. Check out the link in the show notes or check it out at planttrainers.com/shop.
And now for a moment of gratitude.
I'm grateful for my clients, especially one that I've had recently whose inflammation is down so much in her body. Her hip is not bothering her, and when she fell and rolled her ankle, she was back and walking the next day, and that has never happened to her before. So I'm just so grateful that the methods I'm using with her are really going well.
I've been traveling to and from school using a bike, an old bike, a mountain bike that we've had for a while that hasn't been used. And I'm just grateful for finding short routes that have been fun to navigate and so far pretty safe, considering those cars can be nasty. So grateful for the safety of that and the experience.
Dreena Burton, thank you so much for joining us on the Plant Trainers Podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
Full disclosure to the listeners, we were about halfway through the podcast and computer crashed and we lost it all, and we had a really great conversation, and I'm sure that we will have no problem having another great conversation, especially considering our last one that we had in 2015 for episode number 36 when you were on the first time.
Long time ago. Yes, indeed. You know what? Things happen for a reason. So our conversation perhaps will just be much more smooth and even easier.
I thought it was smooth, but it could definitely be more smooth for sure. But why don't you share with us what your gratitude is?
Okay, well, it's different than the first one now. I'm just grateful to be back with you because we lost you, or I lost you, and I was chatting away as I do, and I could see your faces, and then I thought, no, they're very statuesque right now. So I'm grateful to be back with you. How about that?
We're grateful to have you back as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's unfortunate that happened, but thank you for being able to extend your time with us. And let's get this conversation going and back to where it was.
Back to where it was. Sure. So last time we spoke, your kids were wee ones. So we wanted to know now that they're older teenagers, young adults, what has changed with them in terms of their eating styles? Did they stay true to plant-based the whole time? Have they waved in and out? Give us a little bit of insight of how that worked in your family or is still working.
Yeah, for sure. So our girls are now, Charlotte's 20, Bridget's 16, and Hope is 12. And so very, very different time of life for me. When they were little, that was early vegan days too. So people were very skeptical then about the diet, and it was not just considered odd, but almost dangerous, like, what are you doing with your children? But I often was asked, what if they want to eat a burger when they're older, when they're out with their friends? And we're fortunate, very fortunate now that we have options just about everywhere when we're out to get vegan food and vegan treats. Our girls have not wavered. They enjoy their diet. They don't want to eat meat. They don't want to have cheese. There's no interest in it, and they really love their food. What I will say is that when they get older and they're in those teenage years, they want to hang out with their friends, and their friends are eating, more processed foods that we're used to, and a lot of things like soda and chips and that kind of thing. So you kind of have to be prepared for that and know that they're going to eat some of those foods. My kids have never really liked soda, but they definitely, want to have their chips and fries and Oreos and stuff like that. And there's a place for that in their lives. Just know that you're doing, them good by having the healthy, wholesome foods at home. So overall, just, we're on track with our kids and feeling good about their diet, and just in a good place.
Yeah, it's one of the biggest questions that we get as parents who have kids that are 11 and 13 going into their teenage years. Are they going to stay vegan? Are they going to keep eating plant-based? And we don't know the answer. You're going through that. They may change their path, they may not, but hopefully the values that we instill in them and the role modeling that we do for them and what we give them at home is really what makes the difference. Is there anything else that you could add to that to share with parents that are going through that at this time?
Yeah, I mean, that's just part of parenting, right? We guide our children, but ultimately we don't know what choices they're going to make later in lives when they're their own adults and their own responsible for their own decision making. But if you set those parameters and foundations in place, I think that, like anything, it's habit, right? Diet is learned. I've often said that to parents and people who've asked me over the years, just like how kids grow up eating craft dinner and that's what they really love to eat, or they grow up eating really spicy food and their palates can take lots of, heat in meals. Your kids, if they're growing up eating wholesome, plant-based foods, they're going to love and enjoy those foods. So for our children, when they're out with their friends and eating, an Impossible Burger or whatever it is at A&W with their friends, then they come home and they are reaching for fruit or want a salad. Their bodies know that they need that nourishment. So just to really be confident, I think, in that, trust that you've laid that foundation for your children and that those habits and skills are with them, even though you may not see it all the time.
And I think taking that pressure off of your children needing to have a perfect diet all the time and not taking so much control over it, because the more control you try to take of them, the more control they're going to try to take back. And you want to make sure that, as kids get into situations where they have different choices to make, yes, that they don't feel like they're making choices to spite you because you're not letting the leash off long enough.
Precisely. And there's, bigger, badder choices out there than Oreos and having fries a few times a week. It's much bigger picture than that.
In terms of, them eating the Impossible Burger or any kind of food, sometimes that is maybe processed foods, talk to us a little bit about how that's how you're incorporating that onto your social media and what kind of what your audience is expecting, kind of thing. Because I know, being in a similar situation, it's easy to get lost in all of the whole foods sometimes.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, we're on social media and we're showing the foods that we're eating most of the days. And I think it can be daunting for people when they look at that image to think that that's what were eating every single day and every single meal, right? So I was kind of prompted by a comment that I had from someone on Instagram where I had posted a meal, really like beautiful summer meal with a big beanie salad and some potatoes. And then I think I had grilled veggies, and then I had some Guardian Mandarin chicken for my youngest, who really loves it, and she'd had a really busy day, and I just kind of wanted to give her that treat with dinner, and she was so excited. And so when I posted it, someone said, "Oh my gosh, thank goodness, I thought that I couldn't live up to this standard of perfection with the diet that you show." And I just made me step back, and I did a YouTube video about it because I felt like I never want to portray that I'm living perfection with the diet or with anything. And I say that as a person who has always been very like perfectionistic in my approach to things, right? And have had to learn how to scale back in that, knowing that there isn't such a thing, but you still strive for it. And we're online to inspire people, but not to put pressure on people. And we all have convenience foods in our lives. We all have that space for it. And not just for convenience, but to have treats as well. I sort of take the perspective that we eat 80 to 90% like whole foods, and then have that extra for the things that, are more treat-like foods that we enjoy.
I think that's important for everyone to hear, because there are so many people that struggle with the thought of moving into a plant-based lifestyle simply because it's so much more prep work. It's so hard to get the food together, to make it ready. It takes a lot of time, and I'm very busy. I don't have that time. So being understanding to the fact that we could use these foods as transitional foods, or sometimes you just got to use them to speed things up. It's something that a lot of people need to hear. So that's really, really good that you're sharing that.
Yeah, thanks. And I think it's, I feel fortunate that we have them now, so that when my kids are out with their friends, they don't feel like ostracized, or, it normalizes them in that regard, where for many, many years they didn't have that option when they were out with their friends, and I'd have to send like a cupcake to a birthday party. Now, there's just so much out there that it's easy for them to feel like they're not sticking out like a sore thumb in that way. And that's only going to grow and grow over time. And, what looks difficult online, like when we present these items in a picture, it may look like a lot of work, but it doesn't always have to be. And that's the trick, is we learn how to make it easy over time. And it does get much easier, as you guys would probably know as well, right? As you learn some skills, it's not just about cooking plant-based, it's about cooking. So I think, for many, many decades, we got used to convenience foods, and it took people out of the kitchen and out of learning how to just prepare the basics, like baking potatoes and cooking rice. And so when they come back to that, it feels like, oh, I have all this work to do. So it's not about plant-based in particular. It's about preparing food again.
And for some people who are preparing food from the beginning, but they're, marinating the chicken and they're marinating the fish, and things kind of seem simple for them, even though they're used to cooking, it's about cooking the different ingredients too, and cooking the different meals and figuring, what do I cook next? So it can be really daunting at the beginning. What do I do? How do I replace this? But once you start putting in one recipe at a time and learning it and liking it and doubling it the next time and all of that, it really does seem to get simpler over time.
Yeah, it's like anything, right? It's practice. You're learning skills. It's like when you first learn how to, work out in a new format, or learn a new form of exercise. My daughter was learning.
Or a new language.
Yes, exactly. So at first it feels like you have a new brain all of a sudden, and you're not sure how it's approaching things. And then you pick it up over time, and then it's almost as simple as, brushing your teeth. You know what you're doing, and it's simplified, and you make it more efficient.
And I think that, taking the pressure off of yourself and saying it doesn't have to be perfect all the time, I can do it in a different way, definitely helps. How else do you recommend people take the pressure off of plant-based cooking?
Definitely getting some batch cooking skills under your belt. So in this new book, Dreena's Kind Kitchen, I have a chapter at the very beginning of the book that's called From Grocery Store to Cutting Board. And, everybody has different ways of making their lives like more efficient, and techniques that work for them. So this is what works for me. And I share in the book how to, for instance, when you come back with your groceries, to batch wash a number of fruits and veggies so they're there for you and ready to use in recipes and for snacking, rather than reaching in and washing one red pepper and then another piece of fruit for another meal or a snack, but just having it at the ready. And then prepping things in advance too, like perhaps there's certain vegetables that you prep and have them chopped up ready for snacking or for crudité or for dicing for a recipe. And then again, in batch, actually cooking ingredients and prepping ingredients. So I'm a big proponent of cooking more than you need, because you can always repurpose it or freeze it and use it in another time. So some of the things that I prepare in larger quantities.
Let's take a little break so I can tell you about our plant-based comfort foods cookbook. This is comfort food, but I'm telling you, it is healthy. Most of the recipes are gluten-free. All of the recipes, except for 1 or 2 desserts, can be made completely oil-free and have oil-free options right in them. The pictures are going to make you drool. This book is above and beyond what we have put out there before. We're talking about red sweet potato curry, garlic zucchini and tomato pasta, vegan tahini tray bake, tofu pad thai, chocolate brownies. This is amazing. You're going to have enough food for weeks and weeks. And the great thing about this is that we've also included a meal plan and shopping guide to go with it. So if you just wanted to print out that page and go shopping, you'll know exactly what to make for the next 2-3 weeks. This is incredible. Please check it out in the show notes, or you can go to planttrainers.com/shop and check out our plant-based comfort foods cookbook. Guys, this is going to blow you away. And now back to the show.
So some of the things that I prepare in larger quantities are baked potatoes and baked sweet potatoes. This time of year, I'm using my Instant Pot to cook them. And in the winter, I use the oven. Cooking larger batches of rice, quinoa, any grain that you love, and of course, beans or lentils, and having those ready so that you can pull pieces together. Because as much as I develop recipes and love to, I don't cook a recipe every night. I may pull together items from, different nights of batch prepping, sweet potatoes, quinoa, beans, and then top it with a really great sauce. That's a meal. It's not always a recipe, but it's a meal. So getting used to that. And then also being able to batch cook certain things that freeze really well, like hummus. People don't know that you can freeze hummus, and it freezes beautifully. And freezing soups and maybe muffins or quick breads, dips, and also soaking nuts and freezing them. You always drain off the water first, or you're going to be hacking away at a big ice cube of cashews. So things like that. And I have all those tips in the book just to kind of make it easy when you're in that place and you're at the kitchen counter ready to get going, that you have elements in place for you.
You mentioned the sweet potatoes you cook now in the Instant Pot, but in the winter you use the oven.
Yes.
Why do you use 2 different methods at different times of the year?
Yeah, good question, because oven baking them makes them so magically delicious. They roast in their own, I keep the skins on and it's the easiest thing in the world too. You pop them on a baking tray lined with parchment paper at about 400 or 425 for, maybe 45 minutes, an hour. It depends on the size of the sweet potato. And all of those natural sugars caramelize, and it just becomes so delicious, versus if you steam it, say in an Instant Pot, it's still delicious, but you lose that caramelization component. And so that's one thing I like about winter. One of the very few things.
So is it just that it's too hot in the house, or you're too much on the go in the summer?
Yeah, it's just too warm to kind of spark up the oven, and most of us here don't have air conditioning in this area. So yeah, we use the Instant Pot for that. And it's so efficient too. That's the other thing. If you're using an Instant Pot, you can cook. I tend to cook potatoes a lot in them, and I do those little nugget potatoes, literally 3 minutes, the Instant Pot's on, and those things are cooked. So it's very, very quick if you're needing those shortcuts.
I also find the Instant Pot makes the white potatoes a little bit chewy, but I actually really like that and find that it's nice every now and then to have that different kind of texture. Do you find that too?
Right. It can. It depends on the potato, I think, too, right? Yes, I know what you mean. And it can be, sometimes you just want a different texture, and different baking methods will give that to you.
Great. So you mentioned being able to freeze hummus. So I think that that's something that the listeners may not have heard of before. So I think that's super interesting. And, homemade hummus is usually the way to go, especially if you're going oil-free. I know in the States they do have some oil-free ones, but you're paying for it too. So making it at home is great. What else do you recommend freezing that you think people would not necessarily think of?
Yeah, great question. And I love how you say hummus. I think it's very posh, and we should all adopt it.
It's a little bit more Israeli. We get some listeners writing in saying, what's with the way she says hummus?
No, it's beautiful. I like it. The thing with hummus too, I have a food processor that's like big. It's about 16 cup. And often people ask what size food processor should I get? I often say, at least 12 or maybe 14 cups or more, because if you're batch prepping things like hummus or veggie burger mixes, a small food processor has a really hard time working those ingredients. And if you want to make big batches, that's the way to go. So invest in a big one. So you can make like a quadruple batch of hummus and then freeze it in, say, 2-cup portions, and you have it in the freezer for, many months. And it tastes so much better, as you know, than store-bought. There's that odd citric acid flavor in those store-bought hummuses that really turns me off. And the flavors can be really garlicky, etc. So you can customize it. And then you can freeze nut cheeses. Like if you make cashew cheese, they freeze really, really well. Sauces and dressings, if you want to batch prep those, they freeze well. Bean soups and bean purees, super, super good for freezing. And so lots of, really hearty things. And pureed sauces for pasta. That's another thing that freezes well.
And what about when you take it out and it looks like it's kind of separated or chunky? What do you do then?
Yeah, it depends on the sauce and what's in it. If it's like a creamy kind of sauce, sometimes the oils will separate when they freeze and thaw. So a lot of times just heating it up will do the trick. But you could also just thaw it and give it a quick blitz in the blender again or with a hand blender, and boom, you've got that texture back. It's all good.
And Adam always wants to know how to make the rice taste better when you're warming that back up.
So rice is finicky. It's kind of like basil, right? Fresh basil is very temperamental and turns off color in the wrong temperature and doesn't always grow well. Rice it gets kind of hard after you refrigerate it. I like to reheat it in our toaster oven, and I put it on a tray or in a baking dish, and I line it with tin foil and then parchment and enclose it, and it just kind of like heats up in its own steam again, and then that will like rehydrate it and make it a little bit more like fresh cooked.
We got to try it.
I'll try that for you. Sure. No problem. No problem at all. So I know that your kids are a little bit older now, and I'm sure that you're not doing as many school lunches as you were before, but what kind of ideas do you have for people who are now back into the swing of things? They're getting over the sandwiches already, and they want to know, what else can I make for my kids that's whole food, so that when we do have the processed food, we can have it and enjoy it and not feel guilty about it.
Yeah, our kids don't go back until after Labor Day here in Canada, later in September. But I know a lot in the States are already back in school. So my experience with school was that our children all through elementary years, they could not bring nuts to school. So I don't mean just peanuts. They couldn't bring anything with a nut. So no almonds, no cashews, no pistachios, nothing. And I found that really challenging in terms of, for instance, spreads for breads, right? For sandwich, no almond butter for like a PB&J made with almond butter, or also nut cheeses. I feel like now I love having shortcuts with some of the vegan cheeses on the market so that you can use those in sandwiches when those allergy issues are present, because schools are very, very strict on those a lot of times, and you need to have that flexibility in the classroom, right, for your kids. But I have a post on my site, and I can give you the link after. It has like 10 recipes that easy things for back to school, marinating tofu really simply so you can use it in wraps or sandwiches or for just nibbling, snacking. Lots of spreads and dips are the way to go, like hummus. And in the new book, I have a queso. It's called kin queso because it's made with pumpkin seeds instead of nuts. And so a dip like that or that dip could be chilled and then used in lunches, or you could make it a little thicker and use it almost like a spread for a wrap, and then add elements for your kids to make, wraps. Wraps and sandwiches are great for lunches, but then also think about the things you have on hand that are leftovers, right? And repurposing those. I talk about that a lot as well. And if you have a leftover of, a small amount of a casserole, well, that could be used in a lunch for your child. Maybe use it in a wrap, or maybe mash it. Like, it sounds weird, but if you take something that's beany and you mash it or put it in a food processor, it almost becomes like a hummus or a dip, and then you can reuse it in the sandwich. So just kind of thinking outside of the box in that way, and having easy prep lunches for your kids.
I also don't think that the traditional lunch has to look like a lunch. Like, it doesn't have to be a sandwich. It could just be a variety of veggies. It could be a dip, and it could be a whole bunch of snack kind of foods that could be eaten as a lunch.
Yes, because kids really love that variety, especially when they're very young. I find the younger they are, they like having all those like little finger foods, right? So that's very appealing to them. And a lot of kids love breakfast foods for lunches. So you could just toast up some breakfast waffles for them, or reheat pancakes, and then have veggies and a little dip for them. Boom, it's an easy lunch. It doesn't have to be exactly like you said, Adam's, like our idea of a lunch. And I find a lot of kids who aren't eating plant-based, I know from what my children have told me, they eat the same thing all the time. One of our daughters says, this kid at school eats chicken nuggets every single day. And so some kids are not getting any variety. And we really stress in having lots of variety, perhaps because we are more aware and conscious of the nutrition and varying things. But we can ease up on that.
Definitely move away from the labels, 100%.
Yes.
So we've talked a little bit, you've brought it up a little bit throughout your new cookbook, Dreena's Kind Kitchen, 100 whole food vegan recipes to enjoy every single day. So what we want to know is, what are your 2 top recipes that are in that book?
Oh boy, that's hard.
Super hard.
That is so hard.
And for those of you on YouTube, I'm holding it up right here.
Okay. I'm going to throw out one because it's nut free, and it's a cheesecake in there, and it's not just oil free, but it's also nut free. And so I kind of challenged myself to come up with a cheesecake that people could enjoy, that didn't have cashews, because most vegan cheesecakes do. So I think I call that what do I call that? Mythical. There we go. Mythical cheesecake, because it's kind of like out there, right? And I see how I go to the sweets right away. It's my first inclination is to point out what sweets are in the cookbook. I love the king queso. That one's really fun for me. There's a smoky Caesar salad in there. That's great. There's a curried carrot lentil soup that I love just because it's so easy, and I think you can prepare it any night of the week. It doesn't require a lot of chopping, and it tastes amazing, and is really, really simple. So those are some, favorites, but it's hard.
I'm sure it's hard. Ours arrived in the mail yesterday, so I'm super excited to dig into it and make the kids some yummy meals, and Adam, I guess, too.
I just saw you had an Nanaimo bar recipe, and I know our kids are going to love that, so I think we should definitely try that one. They'll love that one. So
over the holidays too, right? That's like a definite one I make in the holidays. Oh, and there's zucchini fritters in there for this time of year when we have those huge zucchinis that we don't know what to do with, or how to prep all of those zucchini. That recipe is awesome, and my kids love those. I have to usually triple the batch.
And you made the Nanaimo bars nut-free as well.
Yes.
So you must have been concentrating on less nuts in this, just so that people can share it at bigger events and stuff like that, in schools and stuff.
I'm, partly because a couple of my recipe testers who've become friends over the years as well, there's nut-free concerns for them and allergies. One of my friends, she has 3 kids. She's been a recipe tester for many books and many years, and she has really, really stringent allergen issues, and has maintained this plant-based diet through it all, which has been really remarkable to me. So I always she comes to mind a lot, and so I know that there's a lot of moms like her, and just people in general, that cannot necessarily have cashews but want to have a creamy, cheese sauce. So I just want to offer that as an option for everyone. I try to give nut-free where I can.
I think it's great, and it's super helpful to so many families and people that are trying to transition to have all these options of great recipes that are at different levels. Like some of them are probably really simple to make, like you mentioned, the soup, and some are a little more complex and have a lot more ingredients involved, and it's a lot more work. But using your batch cooking, like you mentioned, and prepping in batches all helps with that. So the book that we were talking about is Dreena's Kind Kitchen, and we'll put a link to it in our show notes, of course. And before we let you go, is there anything that you could let our listeners know if they're new in the kitchen and they're a little bit intimidated? What could they do to kind of get over that hump or block that's stopping them from really diving in?
Yeah, really, good question, an important question, because, we all have been at that starting point having to figure it out. And like I try to remind people, we all eat plant-based in some way, right? So all of us are eating plant-based foods, bananas, almonds, rice, potatoes, all of those foods are already in our diet. So think about just expanding that and starting with what you love already. If you already love potatoes, then find some recipes that really incorporate them in new, interesting ways, or just kind of, find ways to center your meal around it and repicture what that plate looks like. And then build on it, find one new ingredient maybe a week or two to work with, maybe sweet potatoes or quinoa, and just keep growing with it. As you know, it gets easier and easier, right? What I was cooking in my first 5 to 10 years eating plant-based is not what I'm cooking now. I've definitely grown in the diet, and I've become more efficient in it, like anything in life. So, baby steps. Go with it. Start with what you like. Build on it.
We love that. Great tips. Definitely. If people want to learn more about you or follow you, where would you like them to go?
Thank you. Yeah, straight to my website is dreenaburton.com, and then all of my information is there.
Amazing. So we'll link to all that in the show notes at planttrainers.com. Dreena, thank you so much for coming back for the second time to the Plant Trainers podcast. I know it's been a good 6 to 7 years since, but we're so happy to be staying connected with you and being able to share all this amazing information with our listeners. So thank you so much for being on the Plant Trainers podcast.
And everybody pick up your book.
Thank you. And thank you for all of your work. That's, dedicated work over 7 years. So I appreciate what you do and contribute to the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for listening to this edition of the Plant Trainers podcast. We want to make sure that you subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, or any other podcasting platform.
We really appreciate the feedback we receive from you. Every time we get a 5-star rating or review on iTunes from one of our fans, it really helps other people find us just like you did.
Thanks so much to our patrons. To become a patron, visit us at patreon.com/planttrainers. Even supporting us with $1 really makes a difference in the quality of the show.
And don't forget to connect with us on Instagram and Twitter. Our handle is @PlantTrainers. Like Plant Trainers on Facebook, join our newsletter, and check out our website at planttrainers.com for awesome recipes, a list of our services, and of course, our latest podcast.
We encourage you to email your questions to info@planttrainers.com so that we can help you improve your quality of life through nutrition and fitness.
So we hope we've inspired you today. Join us again next time and have a healthy day. Or is that too corny?
It's a little cheesy.